Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Matthew Heidemann, the Vice President of Public Sector for Mattermost, and Dr. Bill Anderson, Principal Product Manager at Mattermost. Gentlemen, good to have you both with us. And our topic is the team and the cybersecurity challenge and the way DoD in particular goes about staying on top of this ever-changing landscape we have called cybersecurity and domain protection. Maybe to begin with, just paint for us a picture of what you see the domain looking like these days, because it's never the same from year to year. And as we enter early parts of 2025, what is DoD facing in terms of cyber challenges, do you think?
Yeah, so kind of remaining with this CJADC2 topic that we're laying out here, the Department of Defense has laid out a cohesive strategy on where they want to be in the near future. And Mattermost contributions to that are really being more or less the connective tissues of information, people, data, et cetera, really to just really deliver the right information at the right time to the person that needs it, right? And there's many different ways we're trying to do that. We're doing that through things like mobile, where you receive information, very, very closely at the tactical edge. We're doing that at the enterprise level through cloud computing and delivering the more or less enterprise mission planning and decision-making type platforms that enable that tactical edge information sharing and decision-making. But really, our focus as it relates to CJADC2 and the this timely decision making is really our focus and how we can actually deliver that information.
The DoD, I mean, critical infrastructure government in general, but DoD in particular has a lot of challenges on the security, the protection, the incident response front. And there are, there's sort of threats coming from all over, but there always have been. What we see is that there's a need for a platform that brings people together. So because the process of keeping the DoD secure is really a team sport. And these organizations, they're big and they're facing sort of a constant onslaught of there's too much information coming in all the time. There's coming from too many different sources. The folks who are working the front end, keeping things secure, or frankly, just being out there in the field doing their jobs, they're overwhelmed. And they have these challenges with sort of islands of disconnected knowledge. So they can't find the piece of information they want, or it's in a certain specialized tool. There's an incident going on, they need to deal with it, but it's over there in some specialized security tool. The process of resolving these things, discovering what the source causes are, what systems are affected, what processes we have to implement to mitigate, require so many steps. And so there's almost like a perception of a tool tax. We've got the tools, but they don't connect. And it requires so much extra time and sort of lost productivity in going back and forth between them, or copying and pasting data from where you keep your bug tracking to where you're getting your threat management information. How do you put that in one place? And I go back to what I said at the beginning. Dealing with these challenges is a team sport. So it doesn't matter sort of how great your processes are of handling these things, if the people themselves don't follow the process, or if the process ends up drawing something out way too long. Remember, there's a new incident coming in an hour or two, or three, and there's 24 that are on the backlog that are being dealt with. So those disconnected data sources really make that hard. And I think what the government, DoD in particular, needs is more places where they can bring their teams, their sources of data, their information all together into one place. And then in the DoD, they've got another overarching challenge, which is classifications and segmentation, right? So you cannot put all this data in the same place. Knowledge about the data itself, even the names of programs that people are working on, can sometimes be classified. And so they have to deal with, okay, we're handling these security problems, but how do we do authentication? How do we match that to current user clearances? How do we make sure that only the right people are seeing program names or data that's in a particular channel or field about this program? What happens when there's a potential breach? What happens if something from a higher classification got discovered and published on a lower classifications channel? That can be really expensive for customers, particularly the investigation process. And it can sometimes lead to having to take the whole server down and restart it. So, how do you solve those problems for the government? Those are their big challenges, is and stay productive and stick with the mission, right? The mission is not go deal with IT stuff, right? The mission is out there, deal with threats and challenges to the country as a whole. What they're looking for is a tool set that can actually solve that problem, not make it worse.
And you mentioned the team because the government and the DoD, they have security operations centers and network operations centers. And in some cases, those have been combined precisely so everyone will be working on the same kind of basis, working together. So when you say team, maybe elaborate for us how teams, maybe you meant virtual teams could be included in this. And what does it take to enable teams in this environment?
Yeah. So a team is a virtual team everywhere these days. We today are a virtual team, but we're not in the same place. We think of ourselves as a team because we can communicate. I can tell you what I'm working on. You can look at the source code artifacts that the engineering team produced. You can look at Intel reports that are coming in if you're cleared for it. So yeah, team doesn't mean we're in a physical space anymore. Team just means we have some common interest and authority to work on a problem set. So the old mechanisms of sort of thinking about, I'm going to build a fortress, I'm going to put barbed wire around it. I'm going to make sure that all the people come inside the walls every day to do their work. That's long gone. We haven't been doing that for 20 years. Some of our IT systems haven't necessarily caught up with that philosophy.
Well, also in the DoD, you do have far-flung operations globally. And so a problem could be common to someone in 12 time zones apart. And there you, by definition, you're virtual because people are scattered.
Yeah.
But Tom, you also have this concept of the SOC needs to have direct communications with the cyber protection teams that are responding, to the tactical edge on these particular, challenges. The security operations center also needs to maybe more or less communicate with the vendors involved. There's been plenty of incidents, recently and then over the course of the past 5 years where it's really, caused significant impact to our Department of Defense networks. I'm not going to name any names, but being able to identify those issues and be able to isolate those issues quickly and then deal with what the response is going to be really takes that real-time collaboration in order to and connect disparate people that may not be on the same network, may not even be in the same organization. So being able to identify that and have all of the information at your fingertips across the organization, across teams is a critical piece in the cyber defense posture.
And earlier you mentioned the Joint All-Domain Command and Control System, which is partly still conceptual at this point, but eventually it'll be an entity. And each of the armed services and some of the other components have their own version of it or their own contribution to it. What do you see as the major cyber challenges for when it does become the way the DoD actually works?
I think it's going to come down to data and whether that data can be trusted, how it's being delivered. Data manipulation is a critical challenge that I think we need to be able to solve.
Bill,
Bill, do you have any?
I'd say too.
No, I think that explains it. It is it's about facilitating teams to work together. Mobile users, folks inside, doesn't matter where you are, enabling a platform.
And Bill, the way you describe the challenge for JADC2 and really anywhere in DoD is the need for a platform almost to abstract everything that's going on with the multiple tools. And we do hear different operators say, yeah, we have so many tools, we suffer from maybe an overabundance of tools, and They might all be good tools, but they add up sometimes to, let's say, an operational challenge. And so, what might that platform look like that maybe abstracts all that? And you can explain to us what the Mattermost approach to that platform might be.
Yeah, so generally speaking, there are people, there are processes, there's data, and then there's systems, and they need to get stitched together somehow. Uh, an entity who's making a decision about what they need, they should evaluate, well, exactly what are they trying to do? Who are they trying to connect with? Do they have processes they want to follow? Are they a software development organization? Do they have folks in the field that are primarily working on mobile phones? So think first about what's the workflow look like? And then that starts to inform your decisions about what you need in a platform. I'll give you a really simple example, something we wouldn't, we wouldn't necessarily prioritize ourselves, but I just want to allow secret messages between people in the field, and I don't need to keep any records of them. Okay. And by the way, nobody has just that problem. They've got a lot of other problems. But if that's what you need, then there is a real simple, software only mobile phone application that's super secure that doesn't keep messages. Great, you're done. Probably not your best decision if you're in the DoD. Because then the next question comes in, well, what about what about the regulations that say we have to maintain records of data that was done in government systems? Like, oh, yeah, what about classification levels? Oh, how do I ensure the right people are seeing and saying the right things? And then it gets more complex. I have users all over the place. Okay, so I need to administer. I have access control rules. Okay, I need a system that can understand access control. I have, authoritative authentication definitions. Who's cleared for what programs? And those things, by the way, get updated every day. How do I keep the system rules around individuals that literally change hour by hour? How do I make sure those apply? And then what am I going to do? Are we going to do video calling? If you need video calling, think about what that looks like. If you're doing voice calling, if you're doing desktop sharing, you need a platform that can do those things. But you can go so much richer. So imagine you are, managing daily processes where you're sending missions out, you're sending flights out every day, and so logistics problems. How do I deal with? I've got to understand what the weather is. I have to understand what the payload is, what the authorizations required for this particular payload. Where is the flight crew? What's the maintenance status of this aircraft? Okay, now you can imagine. Now there's all these tentacles, all these bits of information coming in, and it doesn't happen automatically. They come into people who are experts at that subject matter who make decisions. Where do they make it? They make it in a platform, right? They talk to each other, they collect the data, they maintain the records, they maintain the security requirements on top of that, they maintain administration around ensuring uptime and all that. But they're people doing work around data streams in a place where we can have a record of it and keep it secure. That's the sort of platform that starts to be interesting and sophisticated for a DoD type of user. That's what we built, by the way. I'm sure this won't come as a surprise, right? So for government agencies, for large enterprise, for development DevOps teams, Mattermost, the platform is secure collaboration and messaging. It's the DevOps workflow, so connecting into your GitHub and Jira systems and hundreds of other ticketing and management and data sources, and for critical operations themselves. So that example of doing flight control, the U.S. Air Force Air Mobility Command runs their daily flight operations out of the Mattermost platform. So they do exactly what I described. They bring all those bits of information together to a disparate team who sources this, makes decisions, updates status, and then can report on the status as that flight moves throughout its program, gets from point A to point B or not, as the case may be. Maybe it ends up having to land at point C. Things get updated in progress. How do you do that at scale? How do you do that on a reliable basis? How do you do that in a modern way? We're not talking about going off and doing a one-off where you pay a single software developer to do something custom for you. You could do that, of course, but that ends up costing tens, hundreds of times more than building a platform that requires that basically supports a large audience of folks that have similar problems. So we get to solve the problem once for hundreds of users, as opposed to each one having to pay the same thing for the cost of that whole platform. So it's about efficiency of the purchasing dollars as well.
So the platform then is useful in operational domains that are, say, at the tooth of the military, and also in the support functions like cybersecurity and force protection. Good way to put it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's a great summary. And I mean, a lot of it comes to the ability of the open source nature of our product and being able to integrate third-party capabilities easy and flexible, right? And that's one of the things and the reasons why we're able to do those types of mission scenarios Bill was talking about, as well as, handle things like cyber support and other, enterprise business needs.
Yeah, talk more about the open source and why that seems to be a growing way that people are building software platforms and applications and so forth, especially in the era of cyber bills of material that people want. They want to know what a platform or a software application
Yeah.
is made of, and how does why is open source growing so much?
Yeah, and Bill's got a great summary on that. So Bill, why don't you start and I can add some color.
Yeah. So open source. Oh no, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, open source sounded like a really bad idea for government. Like, oh no, the hippies are in there and they're they're going to do crazy things to my operations. That's not what it is. I mean, done right, open source means more secure. Open source means better supported. Open source means more quick, more up to date, more compatible. Um, there's a security principle. I'm a cryptographer, by the way. There's a security principle in cryptography and security in general, which is that getting lots of visibility onto something that you rely on for critical operations helps you find and fix those flaws quickly. That's what open source gives you. It's way better than that small team. I paid some company to build it once for me. It's probably secure because I don't know of any vulnerabilities. No. Yeah, that you don't know about the vulnerabilities doesn't mean they're not there, right? So open source gives you sort of the benefits of having hundreds of people having looked at all the critical components. You still control your code. You still build, you have a build of it yourself. It does not change day to day. I mean, an open source customer gets complete management control over their pieces. They can, in fact, look at the code. So our particularly discerning customers um, understand how to analyze code to make sure that they're comfortable with it. They can do that when they use us. If you're buying a SaaS solution where it's hosted by the SaaS company online, you have no opportunity to do that. And so it is a different level of comfort between I trust them. They're a good brand. I'm sure they're doing a pretty good job. And I can look at it myself and run it on my own cloud servers. That's a higher level of assurance that you get out of this kind of
Sure.
model. Um, and the corollary on this from the DoD challenge perspective is that their old proprietary code is definitely not better, right? It's got unpatched vulnerabilities. It's less compatible with new systems and applications. It's more expensive to maintain, and it's much harder to keep up to the latest interfaces, APIs, and other applications that you want to be compliant with. So now that's not to say that everything has to be open source. There's a need. In fact, we specifically as a software company, we have our own developers. That's what we do. We're mostly developers. We're mostly writing this code. Um, it's not about using free stuff. Free stuff is great if you want to use free stuff. That's not what this is about. This is more about taking advantage of a community that creates things that matter to the broadest possible audience, and then putting them through the sort of polishing and cleaning and due diligence cycles to turn it into enterprise grade solutions. That's where we sit.
And look, the Department of Defense recognized this 5 years ago when they started their DoD DevSecOps, policy, right? In 2019, I believe it was the start of the development, and it's been rolled out. We've been living with it for the past 5 years. And it's all about promoting, standardization across open APIs and the ability to integrate, right? The department or the federal government in general has this massive problem where they're overloaded with tools. Everything's in a way kind of stovepiped, and the ability to share information has become very challenging. And with this open API construct, open DevSecOps policy that they've developed, it's really all about being able to integrate systems, integrate disparate pieces of information for that information sharing. So following, not only is it a secure approach, just following it also just gives them economies of scale so they can better leverage their investments.
And in the minute we have left, maybe just comment on the need for efficient communication in all of this. We have this platform, you have collaborators, but at some point they do need to communicate. And maybe just give us the final thoughts there.
Real-time information comms is critical. It's mission critical. The ability to notify somebody immediately of any type of issue, whether it's a cyber-related issue, a mission operation scenario, or in some cases just even business in general. The faster you can get the information, the quicker you can actually deal with the situation. And I don't know if I could say anything more than that about it.
All right. Well, I think that's a good note to close on, because ultimately people have to communicate. And when they have a great platform to do it on, it'll be worthwhile. Matthew Heidemann is Vice President of Public Sector for Mattermost. Dr. Bill Anderson is Principal Product Manager at Mattermost. I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin. You're watching Federal News Network. Let's go back to the studio now for more on the Industry Exchange Cyber.